All right, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm Jessie Servi-Ortiz with the Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council, and today our not so much webinar, it's more of a discussion and input session, information session with the State of Wisconsin Sustainability and Clean Energy Office. We're going to be talking about the State of Wisconsin's Clean Energy Plan. So we're going to learn all about that and have a lot of time for questions and discussions and input from you about what is in your clean energy plan future, what are your goals, what are your challenges, all of that. Before we get started, I know most of you know WSBC, but just for those of you who are new to us, WSBC's mission is to advance sustainable principles and practices forward through the power of businesses. So we work with businesses on everything sustainability. We do that through our membership program, which is new this year. Our tool to help businesses advance in sustainability is the Green Masters program. Cool Choices is a gamification platform that allows your workforce to take actions around sustainability on a daily basis. We are going to be launching a virtual 21st Century Pathways in October this year. We have several businesses signed up. This program is really designed to help businesses take sustainability to the next level and integrate it into the organization based on what is most material to their stakeholders. We also have consultants that work at the Sustainability Consortium and water stewardship. So those are other areas that we support businesses. So you can join WSBC as a business, as an individual, or an affiliate organization. And this is really the best way to get the most support from us and join the community working towards sustainability across Wisconsin. So today I have the great pleasure of introducing Maria Redmond to you. She's the director of Wisconsin Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy. As I mentioned, she's going to kind of talk us through what her process has been, what the state's process has been around the Clean Energy Plan, and then we'll have input after. Before I hand it over to Maria, I just want to announce that our annual conference is going to be at Ingleside Hotel in Pewaukee on December 15th with a leadership workshop and a reception the day prior. We did just reserve a second room. So in the event that we need to have a social distance event, we will have the capability to do that. So I'm really excited to be back in person with our community this December. And a few other ways you can engage in our education offerings. I mentioned Pathways starts in October, and our next webinar for October is the Journey to Zero Waste. This is a partnership with USGBC's True Certification on Zero Waste, and we're going to be diving into a case study with Pierce and their facility and their process around going zero waste. Again, I mentioned the conference, and you can find other upcoming events on our website under upcoming events. So I am going to stop sharing now, and I am going to hand it over to Maria to get started. And Maria, while you're getting situated, I see you're on mute. So go ahead and unmute and bring your PowerPoint up. I did just want to let everyone know kind of the process for today. So Maria is going to kind of talk through, as I mentioned, what the process has been, where the state's at with their, policy recommendations, and then we're going to have a lot of time for discussion. So take notes of any questions, thoughts, ideas you have as we go. We do have prompted questions, and we are going to give you some space and time to kind of put your thoughts together around what your input is based on the question, and then you'll be able to bring yourself off mute or use the chat to kind of share your thoughts and ideas. So please be engaged. All right, I'm going to mute and hand it over to you, Maria.
All right, can you see my slides?
Yep, looks great.
And you can hear me okay?
I can hear you good.
All right, 2 for 2, excellent. Thank you so much for having me, Jessie. I really appreciate it. And I'm so excited to be talking about the Clean Energy Plan and what the state has been working on over the last year. And then to start these discussions and getting more input on the plan, because really this plan is not about just what we think as a state, but being able to talk to stakeholders and folks who are working in this space and citizens in this state to be able to really craft up a plan that creates action and gets us moving. And so really what I would like to do is sort of set up today, talk about a little bit about the office for those who don't know about the office, talk about why we're moving forward with the clean energy plan, and it isn't great, right? The state that we're in is not great as far as it relates to climate and our energy use, and share some statistics with you, but not inundate you with statistics, because really what I want to get to is the discussion and get some input. And like Jesse said, we have some prompting questions, and then I'm happy to meet one-on-one with folks as well after this. So really, again, improving our stakeholder engagement with the state and ensuring we get a lot of input and make this plan beneficial to all Wisconsinites. So just a little bit about the office. The office really is the lead for the state on planning programs, policy development that address climate change and transition the state to a clean energy economy. We participated and helped out with the Governor's Task Force on Climate Change and those recommendations. And we also work very closely with all of the agencies. So we have a lot of different teams within the agencies, which include cabinet secretaries and secretary offices, as well as technical folks and subject matter experts within state agencies, to make sure that as we are moving forward, that we understand the different programs within the state. We know the connections that the state has with the federal governments, with local governments, so that we can all work collectively to ensure that we're moving in the same direction. And also to elevate the great work that's happening throughout the state as well, and let the administration know, hey, we've got these great projects and this great collaborative effort, and let the administration know what's happening so that we can get that support and buy-in to continue to advance these initiatives throughout the state. And then, of course, making sure that we're working with communities, stakeholders, and citizens, so that it's not just the state or government. It's a very, very collaborative process. Energy touches everybody. A lot of people don't really pay attention to energy until you don't have access to it, or you're burdened by the cost of energy, or it's one of those things that we need to bring it into the forefront so that people understand what impact it has on their lives. So one of the things that we want to do is define why the clean energy economy is important. We as a state are still very dependent on fossil fuels. We still have a lot of emissions. We have areas in the state where people don't have access to clean energy, and there's not equitable access to clean energy. We have areas of the state where people are bearing the burden of our current energy production as far as emissions and health and costs. And so we really need to change that. And we want to make sure that we reduce that energy burden, making energy more affordable for all. Our workforce in energy is not diverse. We need to expand the growing energy workforce, and also ensure that it's diverse as well. And overall, reducing emissions to improve health in communities, and really pay attention to people and get that economy going, and get jobs and diversity and equity all over. And then the other part of this is our planet, preserving our planet, looking at the resources that Wisconsin has, reducing emissions. One of the things that in talking, I was able to participate in an environmental justice water seminar and water quality seminar yesterday. And one of the things is thinking about our connection with the earth and our connection with wildlife. And it's what we would refer to as indigenous ethics. Thinking beyond our own inner needs and looking at the way that we impact the world that we live in and the environment we live in, and having a connection with the earth, the water, and the animals that live on it. So it's reaching out and not just thinking about business and making money. It's about looking at the bigger picture and supporting cultural identities. And it's just thinking about communities and where they are. So that's such an important part of this. And I think and I shouldn't say I think it's been pushed back in discussions in the past, and we're really bringing it to the forefront and prioritizing it in all of our efforts in the state. And then there is prosperity of the state that a lot of our money, billions of dollars, are leaving the state because we are still very reliant on fossil fuels and fossil fuels that we don't generate here. So we have to bring it into the state, and that therefore a lot of our money leaves the state. I have a slide I'm going to show you here shortly that describes that a little bit more. But we also have great research institutions here in the state, great businesses who are doing excellent work here in the state and being really innovative and supporting entrepreneurship and bringing businesses from out of state into the state and making Wisconsin a leader in clean energy technology and excelling our leadership in, electrification of transportation, electrification of buildings, making products, transporting products, all of the above. So, there's a lot here, but there's a lot of opportunity for the state. That being said, it's important to look at where we are now. And we are still generating a lot of greenhouse gas emissions here in the state. A lot of that's coming from electricity generation. If you look at our profile from 2005 to 2017, the most current information and data we have up to this point, a lot of it's in transportation and electricity generation. And so that is why some of the goals are really focused on electricity and what can we do to transition these big emitters, and looking at the communities where these big emitters are located and the impacts on those communities. And also looking at sectors that we're seeing increases in emissions. For example, the agriculture and industrial sector are seeing increases in emissions. And so again, what can we do to help reduce the emissions in these sectors so that they don't continue to grow, and that we see overall deep decarbonization, deep emission reductions across all sectors, so that we can really aim towards net zero emissions here in the state. It's also important to understand what kind of emissions are a part of this. And so electricity generation, let's see here, agriculture, you see more of the methane CH4 emissions in agriculture. And just so, to lay the base, is that greenhouse gas emissions is not just carbon dioxide. That's what we hear about a lot, carbon emission reductions, and that's what a lot of the goals are set on. But greenhouse gas emissions are actually a number of different emissions, primarily NOx, methane, and carbon dioxide. So this is kind of the makeup, but it's important to understand that we're seeing carbon emissions across all sectors. And so it's very important to be addressing carbon in multiple sectors. Current energy use is important too, understanding our makeup. Now we're talking a lot about clean energy, and clean energy is going to be coming from renewables. And we only have 9% of our energy use by source is renewables. That's very low. We're still very reliant on natural gas and coal and petroleum. And again, those are all fossil fuels. And then you look at the different sectors again. It aligns with the emissions, but a lot of transportation, a lot of industrial emissions. And so when we're thinking about the clean energy plan and our strategies, we're looking at all of this information and piecing everything together. Where are emissions coming from? What are the sectors that we need to be looking at to ensure that we are crafting a plan that again addresses, and the strategies address all of these areas. And then the last statistic slide I'm going to show you is our energy expenditures. And this hurts my heart. This is like $19 billion leaving the state. $19 billion, I'm sorry, spent on energy here in the state. 12 to 14 billion of that leaves the state. So just soak that in. Even if we could shave off a portion of that, think about what we can do with that money and what we can do for our communities and our economy here in the state. And so even $1 million, like what could you do with $1 million? You could probably do a lot, right? And so we have to look at efficiency, keeping, like reducing our energy consumption, well, generating, looking at our resources here in the state and what can we do to increase renewables, power, by electrification, by the solar, by wind, what are these things that we can do to transition? And so the goals again are set primarily for the electric sector. But the petroleum is a big, huge portion of that. So that's why you'll hear a lot about transportation, electrification, alternative fuels in transportation. Where can we look to Wisconsin for those resources? So before I jump into the clean energy plan, I was just wondering, does anybody have any questions on these statistics or any facts that I didn't cover that you might be interested in knowing more about? Because I'm happy to share those with Jesse to send out as follow-up. So does anyone on the call have any, is there anything related to energy, any statistics, anything that would be helpful with what you're working on, data that would be helpful? Anything like that that you would like to see or hear more about?
I'm going to jump in, Maria. Curious on the industry side of it, if you break those numbers down any further by sector in the state, or is there like another layer of detail in that, or is it kind of I think it was just back one slide.
Yeah, I think let's see. I don't know how to go back. Oh, here we go. There we go. So here.
Yeah, industrial and commercial. If you do you define that a little bit more in terms of, sectors that make this up?
Yeah, so I think industrial and commercial energies. Yeah, I think it is defined more, but I'd have to look and see because it could include, it probably includes manufacturing, it probably includes like electric utilities. There's probably like a whole list. So I can check with OEI and see. The Office of Energy Innovation puts this together through their statistics report. So we can take a look and see what that breakdown is, because it's probably manufacturing, utility.
And that's the link to the report there, because that could be just, okay, that's great. Thank you, because I could take a peek at that. There might be more.
Actually, you know what? I think that might not, that's actually a link to the picture of the report. Now that I'm looking at it, it's a JPEG. So let me replace that with the correct link to the report.
Got it.
Like in a hurry, trying to put links in to make sure people have access to resources, and I put a picture link in there. The Office of Energy Innovation could probably, there's a whole section probably on industrial within that report, but then if there are more questions that come out of it, we can certainly get you that information. Any other questions on statistics or energy use here in the state? I always just want to make sure everybody, this is a lot of stats and data, and there's so much more out there. So if you have any anything that you're working on and you're looking for data, looks like we got a Huda.
Yeah, so this is Huda here, Huda Al-Kaf with Wisconsin Green Muslims. And so the data here is not clear about how much money that leaves the states. It's not clear. I mean, we know that it's in billions, and now you're saying,
yeah.
So I've seen a better slide than this.
Yeah, so this slide is simply how much money we're spending here in the state. So this is how much money total we're spending on energy expenditures. The Center on Wisconsin, the COWS group at UW-Madison published a report that looked at these energy statistics and talked about how if Wisconsin were to rely 100% on renewables and its own energy resources, how much money would stay in the state. And that's basically, that analysis showed that Wisconsin is currently, because they have to talk about how much Wisconsin's exporting in order to talk about how much we could keep here in the state. So when they did their study, it's 12 to 14 million dollars that is leaving the state. So I'm happy to share. I probably should have put a link to that in here so that you could see it, but I'm happy to share that study with you so you can see the data around what's leaving the state and what's staying here, and the potential that the state has to keep dollars here.
Maria, it looks like Matthew said he would be interested in determining how much energy companies are generating for themselves or would be willing to replace by on-site instead of transmitted energy.
Yeah,
So-
that's interesting because Matt, did you want to follow up on that question? Okay, so self-generators aren't necessarily tracked like the utilities and other kind of regulated organizations and regulated utilities. So that is something that I've talked about too, like keeping tabs and helping those who are self-generators. But I would agree that I'm interested in that as well. And I've been talking to the agencies to figure out how we can capture self-generation and then help those self-generators to transition over as well. So I'm not sure if there's like, this is something that I'm still learning about, is like, is there a resource out there that provides a complete summary of those self-generators here in Wisconsin? Or hybrid, like those who are, generating their own electricity, but then using natural gas for other aspects. So there's kind of not a full understanding of the makeup of that particular group of producers.
Yeah, and he said he thinks there's a tremendous opportunity for microgrids and renewables that would decrease costs for new infrastructure and increase resiliency. So I think, that's exactly what he was getting at as well, that if there's a way to track that, then there's a huge opportunity here.
Oh, totally. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. I agree. Yeah.
So there was, Emma had I'm not sure if this is a question or just a statement, but it was kind of a question. Is there any interest in the state to explore programs and incentives for commercial energy storage to support efficiency, renewable energy utilization, and minimize the C&I segment's energy intensity?
Absolutely. So we have been, as part of the Clean Energy Plan, looking at specific pathways and identifying specific pathways. Energy storage is one of those pathways that we're thinking about. Efficiency is super important because we're seeing a huge transition. We have a goal of 100% carbon-free electricity by 2050, but we're seeing a ton of opportunity for transition for building electrification as well as transportation electrification. Is as you electrify those sectors, you're increasing the demand for electricity, so that energy efficiency is going to be so important because you want to reduce the demand to also, like, in order for us to meet our goal, we have to kind of find the balance of reducing and then increasing electrification and then ensuring that electrification is powered by renewables. And so there's a fine, it's like putting these puzzle pieces together to make sure it all fits. And there's, certain steps that we'll need to take, and it's not going to happen overnight. So yes, we are definitely interested in all of these.
Great.
All right, no, that was great. And I appreciate the comments and questions and input. It's super helpful. So recognizing all of these, our expenditures, our current energy use, our current reliance on fossil fuels, we haven't really done a lot. We're really behind. And the recent study that was done, I'm sure many have seen it, the International Panel on Climate Change just did an update to one of their work group, and I should include the link here. But basically, it's just stating that this we're in a dire situation on this planet, and we continue to heat up. And if somebody has that link, feel free to just pop it into the chat. I don't have it handy, but it's, if we don't do something now as it relates to climate, if we don't start transitioning, we're going to continue to see tragic weather events, economic impacts, health issues across the globe. And so we're at a point and a juncture, and we've been talking about this for a while, that Wisconsin's behind. We need to really, really advance, and we want to use this clean energy plan as a tool to do that, and also as a tool to continue to measure ourselves. So this isn't a one and done type deal. This is a living document. That's the plan, is that we're going to come out with the version 1, but it's not done. We recognize that technology is going to change, that initiatives will change. There's a ton of funding that's coming from the federal government to support our efforts. So we want to be able to continue to update this through the times, and be able to ensure that the plan is a tool, and it's an actionable tool that can help with implementation of all of the above. So just to get into, I don't know why this doesn't respond to me right away. There we go. So our plan objectives are to put Wisconsin on a path for electricity consumed by the state to be 100% carbon free by 2050. This is the defined goal that the governor pushed out as part of Executive Order 38, with the creation of the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy, but also for this goal to be met. The other part of it is recognizing that Wisconsin has the contribution to, has the opportunity to contribute to emissions reductions here in the state that will also impact the region as well as global emissions. And so we want to make sure that we're contributing to emission reductions. I think contributing to emissions reductions is kind of a weird way to say it, but we want to reduce carbon emissions and contribute to the IPCC efforts and the Paris Agreement. So we have a role to play, and so we want to make sure we're actively playing our role, and we understand what our contributions are. We also understand that there are communities within the state that realize disproportionate impacts of energy generation, and that these communities have historically been suppressed and reaping the health issues that come from the emissions from coal generation facilities and transportation corridors, and that this is a systemic issue that has been built that needs to be broken apart. And so we want to also tackle that, prioritize environmental justice and economic diversity and equity and inclusion, and ensure that that's a central point in everything that we're doing, and a priority in everything that we're doing, that we don't want to be creating more energy burden. We don't want to create more emissions and have trade-offs in any way. And so it has to be a very thoughtful process, and that making sure that communities that have been traditionally disadvantaged as it relates to emissions, that and economics and social justice issues, that these communities are prioritized in receiving the clean energy benefits. So it is a very important part of everything that we're doing. Also, making sure that that there's equitable opportunity for clean energy jobs. We saw before COVID, like you also have to be prepared for things that happen that you're not expecting, right? Being more resilient is super important. Before COVID, we saw a huge increase in jobs. One of the Midwest Jobs Report reported over 69,000 clean energy related jobs. And some of those went down, but we're seeing an uptick now in the opportunity for jobs in the clean energy sector, as we're seeing more build out of solar and wind and renewable renewables like biogas and things like that, that there are really great opportunities for these jobs. But we also want to make sure that these opportunities are something that any person in the state can take advantage of, regardless of race, religion, color, anything like that. So we want to make sure that the retention of dollars stays here in the state, that there's jobs here in the state, that there's these federal dollars that are coming, that we're looking to Wisconsin businesses to help us spend this money, so that we're really focusing on Wisconsin. We also want to make sure that we're thinking about the reliability and affordability of the energy system. Resilience is a huge part of this. Strengthening our clean energy workforce through training and education, retraining workers as it relates to just transition. So making sure that people who are in current fossil fuel jobs, be it even gas stations, delivering fuel, propane delivery, like anything like that. If we're transitioning from traditional fossil fuels, that we're also thinking about those who are in those jobs and finding those opportunities and being proactive about it, and not assuming that everybody that's in a coal facility wants to work in solar or wants to, build wind turbines. Is like thinking about the people and what they want to do and where they are at in their careers, and being thoughtful again about that and not assuming anything. Also understanding that the transition from fossil fuels over to clean energy doesn't have as many jobs. Solar, even the utility size solar farms can generally operate on their own. There's only limited maintenance and operation needed, 2 to 5 people max, where, if you have a coal generation facility, that's going to be 200 people. What do we do with all those people who are going to be out of a job, and what do they want to do? And so we need working with the stakeholders to figure that out as part of it. And then of course, and this is so important, protecting human and environmental health by reducing ecosystem pollution. So ensuring that we're also looking at the health of Wisconsinites, the health of our environment, because it's all integrated together. And it's not just about me and my space, it's about my impact on my community and the environment as well. So in the plan, I've said this, I just want to make sure that any strategy that we start thinking about and any pathway that we're thinking about, we're prioritizing environmental justice and equitable economic development. We're addressing that within each strategy. We want to fast track workforce development and just transition. And we also want to accelerate lead by example. I haven't really talked about that, but the state, as we're sitting here telling everybody to do, to address climate change and to mitigate and adapt to climate change and to transition to clean energy, we need to be doing that as a state. And so we need to be setting the example, and we need to be trying things out to see what works and doesn't work, and work with those who have, businesses are already moving forward. Jesse, your group with the Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council, there are businesses who are already, moving forward with their sustainability efforts, and they have a lot to offer in success stories. And so it's something that the state can look to. And I've actually just bringing on a lead by example staff person to lead the state and to help us move things along. So that's we want to make sure that we're doing that lead by example work as well. So in developing the plan, we're working on developing key pathways and strategies. And then looking at what's actionable. What are things that we can do right now? We don't have to wait for legislation. We don't have to wait for statutory authority to change. Like what's within what can we do now? What is feasible to do now that will have an impact? It may not be high as the high impact things like a clean energy standard or renewable thermal standard or things like that that need to be thought through more and a little bit more long term. But what are those actionable items? And then identifying the high impact items as well. Those high impact items we'll see high emissions reductions. That's really what we're looking at, is what is our carbon budget and how do we reduce carbon emissions across multiple sectors and deep decarbonization. So, and how do we, like, what gets us to 100% carbon-free electricity consumed by 2050? So those high impact items are going to be tougher, but they're really going to move the needle. And so we want to identify both, because those both are very important. And then again, one thing we want to do is align all of our strategies and pathways with our Paris Climate Accord 50 to 52% reduction by 2030. How do we align, the high impact and actionable items with the national goal, as well as aligning it with other things that are happening throughout the country and throughout the state of Wisconsin, aligning it with current dockets that are open over at the Public Service Commission, because they're going to be doing a lot of the work, making sure that we're complementing and syncing up everything within the Clean Energy Plan as we're developing these strategies to ensure that we're having these conversations, everything's aligned, and again, coordinating and moving in the same direction, so we're not working against each other. Plan development. So we didn't start from scratch. That's what makes us able to get through a planning process rather quickly. It still is taking a little bit of time because we want to make sure that we're strategic and thoughtful in our process, and there's a lot of variables. But we did look to the Governor's Task Force on Climate Change recommendations. There's the Mid-Continent Power Sector Collaborative on transportation, electrification, as well as the power sector and transportation roadmaps that we looked at as a starting point. The Wisconsin Energy Distribution Technology Initiative and the United States Climate Alliance has a bunch of strategies. And so basically what we put together was a long list of strategies, and we've been looking at all of these different strategies and talking with different people. And seeing where does it line up and what kind of comes into the forefront as a priority and pathway forward. And then also looking at the substantial work that's already happening by local governments, by businesses, and utilities. Utilities have made carbon reduction commitments. And again, lining it up and saying, okay, hey, what are you working on? What are your challenges? What do you need? And how can this clean energy plan start driving us in the direction to be able to help you to get to where you want to go? Also, not working by ourselves on this, ensuring that we have extensive engagement. And so these are a sampling of groups that we have talked to, worked with, to start to think through this. We want to ensure that we have a process that captures all the voices of Wisconsinite, and a plan that reflects the values of our states. So, making sure that we're consulting with stakeholders that represent a wide set of values, and try to figure out where it all syncs up. And it includes all of these groups, but it can include way more. So we will be hosting listening sessions, hopefully at the end of October. I keep talking about those. These are going to be wider statewide listening sessions that are focused on certain areas, including transportation, buildings, renewables and efficiency, environmental justice and equitable economic development, just transition. So we're going to have probably 4 to 5 listening sessions really targeted in on those specific topic areas, so that we can, again, hear more about what people are working on and what they'd like to see as part of the Clean Energy Plan. So there are opportunities for input, and that's why I'm here. And hopefully I didn't use up all the time. I have no idea what time it is now, so that we can have some, I can get some direct input from you. But these really, we want to offer Wisconsinites the opportunity to define what Wisconsin's path is to a clean energy future. Topics that we want to talk about are, primary economic sectors, environmental justice, equitable economic development. And it's really the opportunity for the administration to hear and learn from people and businesses and organizations who are working in this space, or those who haven't been working in this space, that haven't been invited to the table in the past, that want to share their thoughts on the energy transition and how it's impacting them, and making sure that we're listening to communities and industry and everyone. So we do have a new website. It's osce.wi.gov. And on that website, we have a form on the Clean Energy Plan. We have a page for the Clean Energy Plan, and I put it here. So when the presentation is complete, and this is complete, you have a link to it, but you can submit written comments as well. I can't talk with every individual in the state, every organization in the state, but I do want to hear. And this will be up. We're not going to be shutting it down when the Clean Energy Plan comes out. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing, what people think about the Clean Energy Plan, and getting more comments and making adjustments. And again, measuring ourselves along the way. Now, I've talked a lot, and I really want this to be I do want this to be a interactive discussion. So I've talked enough. I would love to have any questions on anything I covered related to the process, but I do have some prompting questions for our discussion. So Jesse, should we just do a couple of questions first on anything that I may have covered on the process and like our objectives and anything like that? Or do you think it'd be better to jump into the questions?
Why don't you go forward? And so those who don't have a question maybe can start thinking about like the first prompting question. And then in that sort of time, we could take any additional questions on the process or anything else that's come up for folks.
Perfect. And we have until noon, right?
Till noon, yep.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so no, that's good. I left a good chunk of time, so that's really good. So what I'd like to do is prompt some questions. I have a few questions. I have 5 questions, but certainly willing to expand the discussion more too if you came with some thoughts as well. But for those who haven't, like this is the first time you're being introduced to the Clean Energy Plan, and you're seeing how we've worked through the process of strategies. I haven't actually released any of the strategies. I'm just talking very high level about the strategies, because we're really trying to listen to everybody first before we nail down anything. And so one of the things is you haven't necessarily seen strategies. So if you do have questions on things that we're thinking about, I have sort of defined that a little bit, like buildings, electrification, transportation, industry transition to clean energy, incentives and financing options. Can I think of what else? Renewables, energy storage, optimizing energy efficiency. Like all of those topic areas are things that we have been looking at. So prioritizing environmental justice, but what needs to be done to ensure that happens, that there, what we're looking for is the actionable items. And so that's, some of the high level overview of the strategies. So what I'd like to do is just present the question and then give you a couple, like 30 seconds to a minute to just kind of think about it. And then would love to open up the floor. I think probably the easiest thing to do is raise your hand so that, we don't have people just jumping in, but give it to me. Give me your thoughts. This first question is, how is the clean energy and emissions reduction transition impacting you, your community, and your industry?
I think this is a great question, Maria. And I know I see that we have a few industries represented here. So I think that's great. You'll be able to get some feedback kind of across the board. So I don't know if you want to give any more time. Otherwise, I see some hands raised.
Oh, Lisa, you figured it out. Good. For those who don't know how to raise your hands, yeah, you go to the reactions and then it says there's a raise hand option. I probably should have. Yeah, so let's go down the list here. I see, is it Katie Rasmussen?
Yes, hi Maria. So I work in the utility industry, and right now what we're seeing is a large queue of generation in the state for solar mostly, maybe some wind, but a large renewable energy queue. So it looks to me a lot of this is being industry led as well, because it is just more affordable now, and that's the way of the future. So that's a good thing to see, even without any sort of, I guess, clean energy plan or government incentives. So the industry is going that way.
Yes, I agree. And it's great that the industry is going that way. I think the other part of this is that what can we do to help expedite? Like there's a lot in the queue, but what can we do to help expedite getting those out of the queue and deployed? Also looking at like where the solar is, built. I know there are concerns about land use and things like that. Also too, looking at the opportunities for the smaller scale. Like we know everything in bigger scale is important, but there are opportunities for smaller scale as well. And then, community driven for those who can't afford the utility scale and the business deployment is going to be a big chunk of it. But then are there opportunities for those to also be involved with a community scale type project, or a residential? I'm looking at solar for my own house right now, and I'm trying it out, and it's an adventure to try to figure those things out too. So I agree with you. There's also the kind of the balance too of like, how do we also look at smaller scale and the cost benefits of that size too. Yeah. And I'm not going to make comments on everybody's comments, just so you know, but if it's something that I'll confirm that if it's something that we're looking at. But I'm going to shut my mouth and then let other folks chime in here. Josh Clements, how are you?
Struggling to unmute.
Okay, there you go.
Good to see you, Maria. For the rest of you, my name is Josh Clements, and I'm the current president of the American Planning Association Wisconsin chapter, and the planning director of the city of Altoona in the western part of the state. And so a number of things that community planners do, whether they work at the state or local level or others, is directly or indirectly impacting energy and in our environment. In fact, that's why I chose this line of profession. And so I know there have been planning practitioners who have been involved at a number of the different activities and studies at the state level, including Lieutenant Governor Barnes's task force. There was a number of our members in that committee. So a lot of what, and I haven't studied what has been posted on the website yet, but a lot of the things that have been talked about are on generation side and are on device. So like a vehicle, for example. Whereas a lot of the driving factors in climate impacts end up being just how do we arrange our communities physically? What does our transportation look like physically? And because that kind of bakes in how far do we need to go to places? What is it? Do we have the infrastructure in place to enable healthy and sustainable behaviors? And consequently, what barriers are we putting in place for those things to occur? Because once we we build our cities, our transportation systems one way, it takes generations to change it. And so how are those considerations being included? I would call them like the disparate impacts to energy, from land use and community policies. How is that being baked into your clean energy plan?
I was writing. It definitely is. I think understanding local impacts and that everything happens on a local level. I think one thing we are looking at is we understand that infrastructure plays a big part of this, and that one thing that we know that's coming, hopefully it's coming soon, is federal infrastructure funding and federal funding for this. And so we want to be able to direct funding and also recognize the challenges that local municipalities face and local governments face to help meet goals and meet climate goals, and that infrastructure is a big part of that. And so there are, I think we could probably be more specific in our strategies, but I think it's going to take a little time because we need funding to update the infrastructure. But I guess my question for you is, again, when we're thinking about, I'm always like looking for specificity when it comes to these types of questions. So I appreciate that you're looking on the generation side and device and vehicles. So like, if the state were able to identify a high impact strategy for the organizations that you, or the groups that you work with, what would be what would be most helpful upfront? Like, what would be the thing that would help you the most? I always assume it's going to be money, but is there something like regulatory, or what would that be?
I'll follow up with you on that, because I think there has been a lot of research that's been done, and it is somewhat state specific.
Okay.
But in my perspective, taking kind of a long view on things, so we have very poor local authority over community planning, and the deck is stacked against us actually solving this challenge, because it's quick, cheap, and easy to essentially sprawl, for short-term growth, short-term benefit, and we actually do not have the tools to try to correct the market, the market problems, the market failures in this area.
Okay.
So even if we want to, we can't. So that's a big one. That's like a structural problem with how we do government in Wisconsin, and frankly most states. But we just don't have those tools. And that this even goes into how housing is financed, or how infrastructure is financed. Those things have a roundabout impact on how much energy we use, because that determines are we doing life cycle costing when we build housing. When you're building a new apartment building with a 10-year bond, that builder needs to cash flow and essentially pay off the project in 10 years. So they're not looking at, is this building going to last 25 years or 30 years, or is it going to be efficient? Generally, it's, can I lease this thing, have a certain cash flow, and have the thing paid off in 10 years. And you kind of see that throughout our entire built environment, and it does not allow us to really address these long-term challenges, because the market choices are stacked against it. So that there's a whole system of policies in place, from how our finance system is arranged to what authorities local government has or does not have. So I think we can follow up very specifically with what some of these pinch points are.
Yeah.
Because I think it really is like almost a complete top to bottom reinvention of how we do government. And I think that there are certainly things that are easier to do or have a more immediate effect. And we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but we need to have some idea of what pieces need to be put in place. And a lot of them are related to the kind of work that community planning professionals do or are involved with, whether they're a state employee or agency employee or a local government employee.
Okay, no, that would be super helpful for us to connect and for you to share those resources. That would be great. I appreciate your candid comments. It's really helpful. Okay, so let's move on. Lisa?
Hello, Maria and everybody. Josh, great comments. I completely agree with everything you said as well. And so I'm going to now talk a little bit more about the business side of things, because I feel like we have some of those same structural problems in the business world in the state of Wisconsin, specifically when it comes to women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. We've been under-resourced for a long time, and it's very hard. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, hi, my name is Lisa Giesebauer, and I own Evolution Marketing. We're a certified B Corp and a sustainability consulting and Marcom agency in southeastern Wisconsin. And I've been working in this space for over 20 years. So as a woman-owned business, it's much harder for me to get resources to do things like we're talking about, especially for a small business. And this is, most of my clients are either nonprofits or small women-owned or person of color-owned businesses. And so I'm acutely aware of the need in my space for us all to adopt strategies and processes to address climate change. And it's happening. And I'm not saying it's not happening. It is definitely happening. But the way we're able to do things, like for example, I've been part of Carbon Fund for a number of years, and we've offset our carbon footprint since the inception of this business. But it wasn't until this year, I'm actually going through the process of getting solar panels put on my house this next month. But it took a long time. I mean, I've been in business 14 years this month, right? So it took a long time for my family to be able to afford to put solar panels on our home. And we're able to do this because of the green mortgages, which came about during the Obama administration that most people don't even know about. And my point is that for small businesses who are successful, we still have limited cash flow and limited access to funding from banks to fund things like this. And so I think it would be really great. I had put a note in there, Maria, about different types of incentives. I mean, right now there's a 26% federal tax incentive, but I have clients in other states, and some states are giving like 50% tax incentives or 50%. I mean, there's amazing incentives in other states for my smaller clients who are women-owned or minority-owned to engage in literally putting processes in place to address climate change within their business operations. So they're not just offsetting carbon, but they're actually putting solar panels on, or they're engaging in electric fleet vehicles, or they're doing, energy efficiency things within their business operation. And there's grant money available in other states that are more progressive because they realize it's harder for small women and minority-owned businesses to have access to that capital. So if I can make a plea, I think that would be something that'd be really useful, especially because we only have 10%, as of 2019, only 10% of the businesses in Wisconsin are women-owned, which is also a travesty when you look at the national average, which is about 40%. So I don't know the number of women-owned minority businesses, or women of color-owned businesses. I'm sure that number is smaller than the 10%. So I think that if we want to grow equity in this state from the business community, we really need to tackle some of these core systemic issues.
Yeah. Do you have an example of a particular state? I know one thing Wisconsin lacks is incentives. So this is something that I'm trying to tackle. But is there a particular state that has an incentive program that I'm getting feedback, sorry. That you like, that you could use as cite to, that would be the format works and you'd love to have it here in Wisconsin?
Good question. Let me think about it, because I have clients in both California, New York, and both of their programs are very different. And then I have a client who's in Atlanta or in Georgia, and they don't have anything. So I get that Wisconsin's not alone in the not having incentives. let me look at it and see, and then I can
Okay.
send you a message, Maria, with
Perfect.
what state I think has a good program. I don't know what Minnesota is doing, but I've heard good things, so I think Minnesota might have something. I just
Okay.
don't know.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Matthew.
Well, good morning, everyone. So I have a few things. So the first of which is looking at a few projects in the state of Wisconsin. We have the monopolistic utility structure here. And I think that as we try to involve, whether it's community solar or microgrids or even distributed thermal for district heating operations, that our utility structure right now puts any of those at a very disadvantaged state, whether it's to get permitted to be put in or to even be considered, because if you try to put in a larger scale solar array, like at an airport or something, you hit the restrictions related to grid integration. If you wanted to distribute it to your business park that's on site or across the road, now you're a transmission company. And if you're not working with a friendly utility that's going to be part of an ownership stake in that system, you have opportunities across the entire state that aren't even going to be considered just from that restriction. The next one would be, we have a lot of agriculture in Wisconsin. We're very well known for our food production. The DNR study just came out saying that we had like 15% or more of the waste going into landfills right now is food waste. So we have a tremendous opportunity for organic processing and RNG. And if we have a clean energy plan that emphasizes carbon neutral energy, how are we going to balance carbon neutral with the fact that, yes, we're going to generate methane, and if we do not process that to a clean energy end game, it's just going to be released to the atmosphere. So, and on the balance of that, we also have industries like we have foundries in Wisconsin that are not going to be compatible with a solar 100% renewable future, that are going to be reliant upon whether it's high temperature furnaces or high energy systems that are going to need to have a natural gas supply. So I think that we need to have some statement in there that recognizes that a renewable source may include carbon. I think other things, to Joshua's point, that if we had better planning, we could certainly consider what other countries are doing on district heating. We have a lot of industrial waste heat that could be applied to district heating. And the last thing I'll just comment on is, coming from an economic development background for the last 8 years, we're not doing real good at attracting companies to actually have jobs for people to transition to, whether it's renewable energy or the parts and components that would go into those systems. And I think that, nothing against the companies we have here, but looking at who we have here, we have a very legacy industrial system. And if we have no transition to attracting these companies, we're going to have a problem where we're only going to be a service industry state within the next 10 years or so.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, that's, I really appreciate I think we might be lacking definitely in the foundry and the large industrial folks who will still rely on fossil fuels. And I think it's to your question earlier where you were asking about the like self-generators and those who, I'm just trying to think through like where in what strategies we can develop that can direct to those. Because I know we're looking at renewable thermal standard as a possibility, but I appreciate you bringing that up. And then improving planning, and then looking to Wisconsin resources is a big part of this too. So organics processing, reducing methane emissions it would be a big part of overall greenhouse gas emission reduction. So thank you. Patrick.
Can everybody hear me? Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Ritchie. I'm currently working with JF Ahern in their controls and kind of building automation group group here. Ahern is a large multi-trade mechanical contractor in Wisconsin, and we serve a number of industries, a lot of industrial, a lot of these big industrial customers in Wisconsin, and then commercial, healthcare, kind of the whole gamut. I also did work with the city of Eau Claire on their REAP plan. So this is cool that this is moving forward with the state. And I guess kind of where this is, I was able to spend about 2 years really high level looking at a community and the energy use within a community, kind of on the utility scale mostly. And now I'm more, on the ground in buildings. And one of the kind of things that concerns me a little bit is there's not a whole lot of talk about demand management for, like here's an example. We have a hotel. I was at a hotel yesterday. It's all electric heat pumps and they're 5 kW each. The hotel's full. That demand on that building is massive. And they also have 4 level 2 EV chargers. So if all those EV chargers fire up at the same time, the demand increases even more. And they have an electric heater in the pool. So, I guess where I'm coming from on the building automation side and energy management system is how are we going to address all of these additional systems communicating with each other at the building level? There are relatively low cost technologies already invented. Current sensors are being used for sub-metering. And I think that's, one thing that may be missing in these plans is how are we going to manage demand at the building level? And is that something, I guess, that's being considered? Especially in the controls and building automation world, is you put smart meters on, do those smart meters communicate with the technology already, installed in a building? Can we communicate with those? So
do we have a sense, so the smart meters are in place. Do we have like you're just talking about like one location. Like in my mind, it's like, okay, what would it take to get smart meters placed all over? Or maybe in a particular sector? What would be the cost associated with that? What would be cost benefit? Is it something maybe like ACEEE or MIA have done analysis on? Or maybe like MWork, who works in automation and technology, has some analysis already been done on this?
So I'm sure there has been some analysis. I've worked with Slipstream on a project that looked at basically electric forklift charging and how to get that charging to communicate with the 15 rooftop units that all have compressors. And if they're all firing at the same time and they're fast electric forklift chargers, that building has a massive demand. And if this continues to grow out with the electrification of heating and cooling systems, and we add EV charging to the grid, we're going to need a lot of renewable energy to meet that demand. If it's not communicating. And the other point of it is that there is technology that's out there that's being implemented into buildings right now, and with controls, Distech controls is what we use to mostly manage HVAC systems, but integrating the full system in, I think, is a huge opportunity for demand management.
Yeah.
So.
Demand management is one of those things we've been looking at. That was part of the WEDI report, and we've been looking into that and working with PNC on, the opportunities for that. So that is something we're looking at.
So Patrick, sorry, I muted you because I think that was the reason Maria was getting some feedback. I'm noticing that when others are talking, because now I'm getting it.
Okay.
So sorry about that.
I did just want to say one more thing on that, is that when we get to this, and this is all relatively new. We're trying to figure this all out together, and I think it's awesome. But there's this gap right at the building level and the utility scale level. Is who fills that? The utility company doesn't know that X business has a full-blown building management system or energy management system installed in their facility. And how do we bridge that gap that some of these large industrial facilities already have the framework to start managing their energy and demand more effectively, I guess, in benefit of the utility company and the business.
Yeah, Patrick, you have some really, really good points. You know, we deal a lot with manufacturers, and so that's some really helpful things to sort of think through and to consider problem solving as we move forward through this. Maria, I had the thought that I should potentially connect you to Wasmer. They're a member company of WSBC, but it's kind of exactly what they do is support businesses around energy efficiency. And, you know, so they're kind of on the ground working through a lot of these issues with industrial users. So they could be a great resource for a voice for kind of some of the problems and issues. And they might be great to kind of have a conversation with. So
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah, be happy to.
also,
Go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say we had a question in the chat. So unless
Oh,
there was
yeah.
something else you wanted to say, I was going to ask you that.
No, that,
Okay. So Christina was asking, is there a plan to install public electric car charging stations, especially in lower income areas?
yeah, so electrification of transportation is a pretty big deal when it comes to carbon emission reductions. And so we are looking at that. Now, we are definitely looking at the opportunities for charging stations in low income areas, as well as areas near transportation corridors and in rural areas as well. So like making sure that, you know, there's an even distribution of electric chargers. Also getting some of the resources needed to be able to know where to place them and where to prioritize. So one of the first steps to that is planning and we have a number of state agencies that meet on a monthly basis who are thinking about this. And getting the agency, Department of Transportation, Economic Development Corp, Department of Administration, Public Service Commission, we all have a role to play when it comes to the deployment of electric vehicles and chargers, and on different levels, light duty, medium duty, heavy duty. So the answer to that question is yes. It's a matter of where and how quickly and where the funding is to deploy those. So it's kind of putting all the pieces together, but that is definitely a priority area for us. Is there any follow-up?
There was just a few questions kind of around hydrogen and its kind of role to play. And there was, you know, a few thoughts and concerns around that. So is that, Matthew, I'm not sure if you wanted to speak directly to that. I see you just raised your hand. So if you do, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask about the EV charging too, because I know there's a number of programs, but with the state program that you were working on and talking about today, we have a mix of private companies like Charge and Blink and others that are actively developing their own charging infrastructure networks in Wisconsin, or the Tesla superchargers. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have utility-owned charging systems, whether it's MG&E or some of the co-ops have their own charging systems.
Mm-hmm.
How is the plan going to address that? Is it going to be let's make sure it's an open market for everyone to develop these systems? Or are we going to let it just be, because I've heard some rumors that the utilities want to monopolize that as we're a distributor of energy and we should own this as a electrical sales point.
Yeah, some of those questions, those are great questions, Matthew. I think those still need to be answered, right? Who owns the electricity, who owns the charging station, does one pay? You know, we're seeing deployment of we've seen them by private and public, or the utilities. So in this case, I think some more analysis obviously needs to be done on electrification of the transportation sector. And I think that is the first step in the process. And that's sort of what there's still a lot of unanswered questions that need to be answered. And the Clean Energy Plan will say, we are going to answer these questions. And we're not going to sit here and talk about all of these outstanding questions anymore. We're going to figure out the answers to these questions. And we are going to do it in the next 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is, the time frame that we can get it done. So it's no longer just sitting in a docket over a Public Service Commission, or we're seeing kind of all these things happening around us, that we say, okay, we're tired of asking questions on this. We want to do that deep dive and figure out how we're going to get this done. And that's sort of what I see the plan doing. While it doesn't probably, people want okay, I want the Clean Energy Plan to say what's going to happen, and answer all these questions right now. There's still work that needs to be done to fully analyze it. So, but we shouldn't be waiting anymore on that. We're behind on electrification and transportation as compared to other states. Again, another area. So let's tackle it. Was that helpful, Matthew?
Yep. Thank you.
And then hydrogen, yes. So one of the things that we know that utilities have these great goals, and we're excited that utilities have announced carbon reduction goals. And in the discussions with utilities, they're making huge strides. And I think Xcel's already met 40% of their 80% goal, Alliant as well as inching up towards their 2030 goal. So there's a lot of these utilities that are moving forward. But one thing in the discussion is, carbon neutral, net zero, carbon free. What are we really getting at? And the governor set the goal of 100% carbon free electricity consumed in the state by 2050. So that means the electricity that we use needs to be carbon free generated by 2050. So with forecasting, it comes with positives and negatives when you come to forecasting, because it might happen or it might not happen. But based on forecasting and what the utilities are looking at, and where we're headed and what we see in the queue at MISO, we could get to 80%, maybe even 85%, but they always fall back on that 20%, is that we're not really sure how we're going to get to the 100% carbon free without, carbon sequestration. We'll still have natural gas production for reliability. So what do we transition that natural gas production over to? And this is where hydrogen and renewable natural gas, I think, come into play even more. And then there's different kinds of hydrogen. There's blue hydrogen, green hydrogen. And so we need a full understanding of how and what type of hydrogen gets integrated into that market. And I'm not an expert on this. So I only know high level that this is an opportunity for the state, but where and how and what does the state do to explore hydrogen as that option to meet our full 100% carbon free goals? If that's what the utilities are telling us they need to get over that last bit to meet the goals. So I think from the Clean Energy Plan's perspective, that's where innovation and research comes in, and the ability to support innovation and research as well as pilots. Where can we find some incentives or funding to support early exploration of these technologies to ensure that we can fully deploy them in the future. Another thing I'd like to say is that renewable thermal is a huge topic right now. We are part of believe we're the only state as part of the Renewable Thermal Collaborative. And they just received a lot of money to do some analysis, and they're doing analysis on Wisconsin and the top 20 manufacturing states here in the US. And they're going to be doing specific analysis related to Wisconsin and the impact that renewable thermal can have on our industries. So I'm really looking forward to that, and as being a member of that organization, to be able to use them as a resource to help with some of the analysis as we start to think about that opportunity. The Clean Energy Plan, one of the strategies is also creating a renewable thermal standard for the state as a tool to transition to renewables on a larger scale. So my next question, you kind of already jumped into it, and I can, a few people haven't spoken quite yet, but my next question was based on strategies is, are there areas you think the state should prioritize when it comes to the clean energy transition? And I think we sort of talked about the impact, but then it looked, Lisa brought up, prioritizing women-owned businesses and incentives and growing that equity. I think looking at the finance system and the authority of local governments, agriculture and food production as an opportunity to reduce emissions, looking at foundries and large industry. I've got demand management. What else? What else are people thinking? What do you think that the state should prioritize? And again, thinking, and this is thinking in the realm of immediate actions. What are the things that the state should be looking at right out the gate? These are the things that this is something that needs to be done. Got a couple of hands.
Can I go? It's Lisa again.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there's this program tied to farmers in the watershed in which I'm located, and it helps provide cover crop education and offsetting of prices for putting cover crops in on farmland. And by farmers transitioning from traditional production ag standards to more holistic, sustainable farm management practices, through this program, they're able to improve not only the quality of the water in the region, but also to sequester carbon through the process. And I think a program like that, that's already in effect, it's working, it's managed through Tall Pines Nature Conservancies here, and then it's a partnership through the Greater Oconomowoc Watershed region. It's working, right? So like a program like this, I would love to see expanded to all farmers across the state of Wisconsin.
Do you have a link to that?
Yes, I will get the link and I will share it in the Dropbox.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Lisa. Patrick.
Hi, I just wanted to maybe just like clear up the first question is what I'm thinking is maybe an immediate strategy is I don't believe that there are any incentives for sub-metering in buildings. And because it's not a direct energy efficiency reduction, but it's really challenging to go in somewhere and know what's going on without metering behind the utility meter. So
I really second that, Maria, from the standpoint of a lot of businesses that we work with, right? Like, yeah, they'll track energy and carbon, but not to a scale that's really letting them have full autonomy of decision-making about what's happening because it's high level, right? So breaking that down to kind of really understanding, where the energy is coming from through different production units or, different divisions or, really allows them more capacity to build in, options when they can get a better sense of, kind of localized energy use in their operations.
So would it be a grant program? Like, how much? I mean, like when I'm thinking about submetering, like the university system, for example, I think that, like to submeter every single building, seems like it would be a considerable cost, or is there a threshold?
Yeah, and I'm thinking more of like industrial usage where
Industrial,
the
okay.
energy intensity is the highest.
Okay.
So, building use kind of ebbs and flows and is less, I mean, you can transition that to renewable, but it doesn't have the intensity that, some of the industrial equipment does.
Right, that makes sense. So if we focused on industry, but then, so like if I wanted to pick a facility, or, like pick a company, like how much would it cost?
Gotcha.
So
Put in the submeter.
Yeah.
I could maybe pipe in on that a little bit, is that when you spoke about the university systems, they're all likely going to have a controls or building management system or energy management system already installed to control their HVAC. And really what you could do is add submetering right onto that system and create an energy management dashboard. Essentially just be pulling data from the different rooms you want to meter, the lighting system. If they had HVAC equipment, you wanted to put a meter on the HVAC equipment and see what that rooftop is using compared to a different one. A lot of times the large capital cost is already installed, so it would really just be looking at the metering, and it's an extra cost on a new construction that is maybe not seen as completely necessary.
But if, for example, for the state, as state lead by example, we said any new construction needs to be submetered because this helps us meet be able to track and meet our carbon reduction goals.
That'd be pretty cool. And on a completely separate note, and I'm gonna maybe out myself here a little bit because I've been thinking about this, because I did some of the carbon footprinting for the city of Eau Claire, is that if you have that energy data at submetered, you could say, X room is using X kilowatt hours, and then figure out what the carbon footprint of that room is. Just from that going energy intensity of the grid for what you're using for energy. And you could create like cool, and there's softwares out there that you could create cool like competitions between departments.
Oh yeah.
That'd be cool.
Okay. And for industrial, is that the same, like, would that be do they have the energy management systems already in place as well?
A lot of them do. I mean,
Okay.
it's a mixed bag. I mean, but they're primarily used for HVAC, and it would probably be better if we wanted to talk about this maybe offline, so I don't take up the whole thing on this, because I've been in this industry for about 5 years total in the HVAC world, and it's getting more complicated. So.
Well, and Maria, in addition to what Patrick's talking about, I'm thinking of some of the manufacturers that we work with that, might have monitoring systems that may or may not be related to particular like machine production lines. And so I'm thinking like on the actual production usage, right? Like that's a huge capital expenditure for some of these manufacturers. So like if we could have them understand how much, like even down to a machine level, how much energy it's using, it might show them that an investment in a new machine that's much more efficient actually will pay off, right? So like, and again, this is where I think Wasmer could be really useful because they do this metering inside industry. So
I'm talking and I was
the last
on
thing I'll say is it potentially avoids large studies. If you have the data in the equipment metered, you don't have to go and spend $50,000 on an energy study. The data's already there. So
Thank you. Patrick, oh yeah, your hand was up. Sorry. I just was talking to you. Brian.
Yes, hi. I'm Brian Christophic with Ardagh Glass. We are a glass producing company in Burlington, about 400 people, and we use a lot of natural gas. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback from your line. I'm having a hard time hearing that.
Okay. I'll just put some things in the comments here. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
Brian's on the shop floor.
Yeah, it sounds like it. No, that's exciting. I feel bad. I couldn't understand what he's saying. Matthew.
I was just going to state that with the priority for electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging in low income neighborhoods, that one thing Wisconsin doesn't have that I've seen in other states is we're not really deploying the Volkswagen mitigation fund money as effectively. That those communities would be better served by having them have access to like electrified mass transit and something else, because as individuals, the burden to try to acquire an electric car until we start supporting incentives for used ones is likely more than that they're going to be capable of handling. Yet they could get to work on an electric transportation system, very quickly if we were to go with a mass transit system and a centralized electric charging hub at those places, but we need to be able to fund them.
Yep. I agree. Yeah, we're definitely looking at that part of electrification. Thank you. Christopher Cole.
Good morning. Thanks for everybody. Thanks for my teammates on our policy for informing me this one meeting in my backyard. I'm in Glendale, but I work for Convergent Energy Power of New York City. I just want to second that thing about manufacturers about having incentives for sub-metering. We tend to find across the country with my colleagues on calls that a lot of manufacturing facilities, they expand over time, they add square footage to their facilities, they remodel. A lot of times they're even on multiple meters just to really confuse things. They're not on a single central meter, and that those sub-meters or multiple meters, they're actually not sub-meters, they're actually primary meters, tend not to follow specific loads. And for projects we do in New England, for instance, can be very confusing for us when we help our customers model where energy storage and distributed generation might be impactful for them. I think this really is a very interesting area for Wisconsin with our large manufacturing base for the state to really help these end users, these energy intensive end users, really drill down and down to their loads, their specific demands, ways that they can better energy manage and allocate costs and potentially savings by having better sub-metering data and also collectivized data as well too, especially in larger older facilities in particular. I think that's going to be very key, which we have a lot of too. Like the glass plant in Burlington likely would be a kind of company that would be applicable to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It looks like Brian still has his hand up, but it did look like he's putting some things in the chat here. So I'll read that if you want to comment on it. So large industrial producer in Burlington using gas and electricity to make glass, food and beverage packaging. Metering and measuring is the first key step. And then priority to clean energy transition. Industrials with a lot of land or a very large roof like us, we have a good solar success story in New Jersey. So incentivizing and easier to do business, industrial, large scale, near site or on-site solar.
No, that's great, because that is one of the things that we're looking at is, the different land use options for solar deployment. And if industrial facilities are interested, what would it take to be able to analyze and get those renewables on site for you and consider that an option, especially when we're looking at, large swaths of farmland as in consideration right now. If there are other options and other opportunities in different sectors, I think that we should be looking at that as well and prioritizing that over land, prime farmland use. I feel like we've sort of transitioned into the next questions as well. So maybe we can move on to the next question, which unless somebody else has comments on this one, and you feel free to still comment on this. But the next question after prioritizing are what strategies have worked in your community or industry to support sustainability and clean energy. And again, some of those it sounded like were already addressed, like the cover crop program, the example of that we got from Brian about a very large good solar success story in New Jersey. Are there other strategies that have worked? And again, thinking about these pathways of like energy efficiency, workforce development, environmental justice is something we haven't talked about. So do we have, is environmental justice something that you're considering in your planning, and have you, or is it something that's new to you? And what has worked, and or what are you looking for that would help you along the way? Let me think of the other energy efficiency, renewables deployment, energy storage. I know there's like a really great energy storage story at the Boobles Nature Reserve. Is that right? I think that's it. So anyway, I'm going to pass the mics back over to you. What do you think has worked in your community in this area? Yeah, let's see, Chris.
Yeah.
Christopher Cole. Oh,
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
oh, okay. Okay.
Apologize for that.
No worries. Josh, comments.
I think what would be most useful is a resource for how to understand the disparate impacts of these decisions, because most organizations, even sophisticated ones who may have staff dedicated to policy research, need to have an authoritative or trusted source to say, according to this guide, here are the likely impacts from these range of choices. Because most organizations, most businesses, most local governments, they don't have staff that are dedicated to this. They're asked by their elected officials or owners to say, okay, so this is a priority. How do we think about it? And then we have to scramble around to try to figure this out. So if there's a resource that can be assembled and regularly updated that categorizes the typical trade-offs, whether it's a school district updating something in their site plan to a business that's looking to make a change on what kind of product they're using. Something as simple as green or preferable cleaning products. They may have disparate impacts, but how do we even go about understanding what those might be? And so rather than bogging down staff at different levels, having them each have to recreate the wheel and chase these things down, if there can be a resource somewhere, and there may be bits and pieces of these things that already exist, but how do we understand these trade-offs, and how do we make it clear that this resource exists for organizations that to utilize in their decision making?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. Great idea. Lisa.
Sorry, I was sharing information about the Oconomowoc Watershed Project. They have their own website for it, so I just put that in if anybody wants to know. So there's an entire website just about that project. So it's been in existence for several years. What I was going to say though to this question is, I think what I'm seeing from a small business standpoint is that it has to be easy. So whatever programs or projects you're going to place, it needs to be really easy. And I brought up EV chart, or I put up, sorry, in the notes. So I have an electric car. I'm the first business in Wisconsin to have the all electric Nissan Leaf. I've had it for, it'll be, now it's over 9 years. It's like 9 years and 3 months I've had an electric car. Okay. And I love my electric car. I'm looking at switching out my batteries next year so that my range will go further, but my car is amazing and awesome. And it's crazy because I'm paying extra money every year because the state legislature said you have an EV, you should pay more because you're not paying for all these other taxes that go into the roads. And that's a disincentive for folks to engage in alternative fuel vehicles or EV vehicle purchase. And here's the thing, my vehicle's been through my business the entire time. I mean, my vehicle's decorated, it's got Evolution marketing on the side, it's got green leaves, it's adorable. And part of it's been an educational piece too. This whole time is that driving an electric car, I've helped to raise awareness and education. And it's like, I feel like my business is being penalized because I've been progressive on something. And I feel like that's how businesses feel about a lot of the policies that have been put in place. We are trying to meet our clients' needs, and my clients want me to be carbon neutral. My clients want me to be engaged in finding ways to combat climate change. But I feel like the policies that the state has put in place over the last 10 years have really been a disincentive for me to do these things, though I've done them regardless. But I think however you move this forward, Maria, you and your team really need to find a way to make it easy and incentivized for small businesses to do these things. Because the other thing is big businesses, we talk all about big business all the time, and that's wonderful. But the reality is we have over 100,000 small businesses in the state. And if you create a program where every small business could even just, switch to heat pumps at their house or put solar hot water in. I mean, just basic small things, that could help a large segment of the population. So I think we need to think differently about how we've done this in the past and really look at what programs could hit the masses, right? And not leave the small business out of the equation.
Thank you. We drive a hybrid and have to pay the $100 a year too. So that irks me, especially being in the work that I do, having to have that disincentive. And then how do you promote electric vehicles to like low income families, even moderate income families where every dollar counts, right? And now you're charging them more to drive these vehicles. And that is a disincentive when you kind of put food on your table. Now you have this extra registration fee.
Well, and Maria, the same thing goes to, I've been paying for renewable energy. I mean, since I've owned property in Wisconsin, I've been paying extra to the utility company every month for renewable energy, which is crazy because I'm paying extra because I want the utility company to see that there are customers who want to purchase renewable energy. But then now I hear about all of these huge solar projects, renewable energy projects that the for-profit utility companies are going after, putting in place. And it's like, well, wait a minute. So you're going to change your load in the state to meet what your stakeholders or shareholders' demands are. But those of us who've been paying you for years, We Energies, extra money for renewable energy, we're not getting any benefits out of this. This isn't cool, And so that's where I'm at the point where, well, I'm just going to put renewable energy on my home. I'm going to stop paying the for-profit utilities anything, and I have battery storage coming. And so my point is, but I have the ability to do that because we're financially able to do that. Not everyone can do that. And that's where I'm really just concerned with a lot of how the utilities have operated. And on the topic of for-profit utilities, I'd also like to encourage your office who works with them or works with the PSC to really encourage them to put a plan in place so it's not willy-nilly. I feel like when it comes to planning from the for-profit utility sector, we haven't gotten a good plan. And so we as customers, like I get yanked around by the utility company. I don't have any say in it unless I go completely off grid, and that's not doable, you know? So I think if there was higher level of planning going on, that could make small businesses have better access to doing some of these things, and then they could plan better too.
Thank you. Thank you. How about we have Katie, and then I will address the codes comment that's in the chat. So Katie, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. So seeing this question just kind of sparked something, and I'm not sure how you guys would address this, but I think having visible renewable energy that's easy for the community to see, maybe some sort of information placard, stuff like that, that makes it kind of like an educational tool and to kind of just get more support. So I'm thinking of, I went to Gateway Tech School, and the CAT-I Institute had a solar or a wind turbine, and it was right in their parking lot, and you could see it and you could ask more information about it. And I think if we had something, if you could somehow, I don't know if incentivize is the right word, but make things more visible to the community at large, that could be helpful.
I agree. And I was on a recent podcast, and I was said, don't ever underestimate the power of education and outreach. I think, you know, just having more visibility and explaining things. I drive a natural gas vehicle. I find it to be the lesser of two evils. I have driven it for a very long time, but when I pull up next to those big trucks in Quick Trip's refueling canopy, I 90% of the time get asked by truck drivers about compressed natural gas. And so we just have conversations. So I think, you know, people are interested, and I agree that education and outreach is super important. So thank you for that. And that is part of many of the thoughts towards, like, okay, so what do we want to focus on for education outreach as it relates to the clean energy plan, and what is the best out of box action to focus on. So there was a comment in the chat related to building codes, and the current, if you haven't been following, the Building Codes Council has been meeting, and they are set to adopt a new set of building codes here shortly. The end of their process is at the end of this year. So there's still time, if you aren't familiar with their process, to go to their website and submit an agenda item. That's the way that they accept input. And I actually have been communicating very closely with DSPS, because I've been trying, one of my jobs is to align the work that's happening along with the goals that we've set for the state. And so we are considerably behind on building codes as it relates to energy efficiency, EV readiness, solar readiness, like the ability to build and be thinking about the future. So I actually have a meeting with DSPS staff, their policy staff, right after this meeting. So I'm engaging with them and talking with them about, like, what can we do to ensure that the work that and the process that you have and the people who are on your Building Codes Council understand where we want the state to be headed, and how can we sync those up so that we're not, you know, updating code, but then Wisconsinizing it so much that it falls behind again. So I agree with the codes updates, and I'm working really hard on fully understanding the process, when people can provide public input, because that's a part of this as well, is the meaningful involvement of communities, of local governments, of anybody who has to be held to these regulations and standards, to be able to chime in and have a voice in the process. So this is something that I want to make sure that we get as part of the clean energy plan, to be able to address building codes and the building codes process, and figure out, like, what's the action item behind what we can do to make sure our codes are up to date. And forward thinking, not reactive. Was there any other comments on codes from Joshua or anyone? All right. So again, you all are a great crew. My next question was related to challenges you have faced as you've tried to transition to clean energy, reduce your carbon footprint, and to reach your sustainability goals. So some of those challenges have been brought up through the idea and strategies that you've brought up, as well as you know, what the state's doing to disincentivize some of the renewable energy and electric vehicle deployment here in the state. Are there other challenges that you can think of that haven't already been addressed? Okay, and that's okay. The last one, last call, we're almost to time. And do you have any other ideas, strategies, or other thoughts, recommendations from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that I've done in past lives is help to coordinate a statewide coalition of local governments to share, kind of as a learning community. And they met quarterly and had a pretty healthy, even 12 or 13 years ago, whenever this was, use of virtual platforms to share resources. So it's an idea of, well, we tested this thing, how did it go? And so everyone wasn't reinventing the wheel all the time. And it was also a way for us to use our colleagues across the state as resources to know, who can I call who may have done some work on this issue. So for example, at that time, plug-in hybrids and things like that were very new. And so we could call a jurisdiction who made that purchase and figure out how it went. So many of those organizations went away after the 2010 election. And so some of them are pulling back together, such as the Wisconsin Local Government Climate Coalition. But I think to the degree that those efforts can be supported and resourced are tremendously helpful. There are, I know that there are, like the Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council, there are these entities out there. So how do we cross-pollinate between these sectors also? So for example, if local government is able to get together and create a statewide coalition, how can these be cross-pollinated with business and with ag and other transportation, other sectors, so that we're kind of all aligning our efforts rather than working in our silos. So I think there's a tremendous amount of progress that can be made just by sharing what we already know without doing some of the other really difficult systems reinvention that we're going to have to do. And also better understand what is it that we actually need to do. So it takes primarily the barriers, as far as I can tell, is not a lack of interest, it's a lack of time. Someone needs to actually do that coordination work and manage those platforms and things like that, such as I imagine Jesse probably does for Wisconsin Business Council. Someone's got to do that work, and it's difficult to find people who have that time or the resources to support someone to do that.
Yeah.
So the degree that we can somehow figure out how those things can be resourced would be tremendously helpful.
Yeah, I have a quick question for you. So would Lisa brought up the Energy Independent Community Program, and that program kind of isn't as active as it used to be, and doesn't, I think, necessarily have the resources that it used to have. But again, with everything that's going on federally and like looking to local governments for that work, I'm wondering, would this be something that you want to have state-led, or would you want to build off, some of these other efforts that's happening with like the climate group, the WLGCC, or is it easier for the state to lead it and assign a person, maybe creating a position or something like that where they can lead it and then interface all the different groups together, like the Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council, and and one, share resources, but then like you said, cross-pollinate. But should that be state-led, or would that be shifting resources over to another group to lead it?
Well, I think with EIC, it was helpful because it was state-led and resourced, and so we had a lot of other local governments that stepped up and other organizations that stepped up with time and expertise. And it was, I think, pretty successful over the 2.5, 3 years it existed, but it was not resilient, as we saw. So as soon as the funding priorities changed from the governor's office, the plug got pulled. And so there was no backstop. I think there were some efforts that continued organically for some time, but it went away pretty quickly. And so drawing upon the state is very useful until it's not there. So I think if we can create a system that's more, or a platform that's more resilient, which likely will mean having to have more partners at the table, it would likely result in it would be harder to start, I think, but it would be likely result in a more resilient effort, because what we've seen from some communities that have continued on that EIC work is that they essentially have their Rolodex of 5 or 8 of their colleagues who they met through that program, and they can have continued. But for local governments who don't have that dedicated staff or resource, it just kind of went away. And so right now, we look to like the Wisconsin League of Municipalities is kind of in-kind occasional support for that effort. But I think the university has quite a number of programs that have provided some light touch assistance in that regard. But how do we create some kind of more resilient entity that can persist regardless of what might happen with state politics?
I just want to comment on that quick from my vantage point working with businesses. I agree that we can go faster, further, and more build off of momentum if it's not necessarily linked to the administration. And part of what I see my role is in helping facilitate across sectors some of these conversations, because I hear them going on. And although we serve the business community, it's really hard sometimes to engage the business community in some of a conversation that they view that's more towards cities, right? So I think within, having sector groups and or, industry type groups could be really useful, but then some kind of overarching that can, cross-pollinate within those groups as they make sense, I think would really be a structure that could work across the state.
I agree. I think collaboration and sharing resources and success and challenges and best practices and peer-to-peer is a great way to get things done. So yeah, I'm all for it. Lisa, a quick.
Yep, I'll be super quick. So back when we had the EIC program, the city of Oconomowoc participated in the Green Masters program, which is offered through the Wisconsin State Business Council. So I feel like we have a tool already that exists. Businesses, nonprofits, and government can all participate in the Green Masters program. Right now it's free, it's open to the public. So I think we have a tool that we could do some of the basic level tracking across all the sectors. And then I think it'd be nice if there was some type of additional incentive maybe for the governments to, help pay for implementing some of the things that might come out through doing the Green Masters program. But I think we've got a great tool now. I don't think we should negate that, because we have over the last, 12 years, the Green Masters program had government agencies participate in the program. And even Oconomowoc was a master company even back in the day. So it is doable for a government agency to become a master company. It's not only for for-profit businesses.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, whatever tools we can leverage through this planning process, I think that's a great idea. So we are done. It's noon. I want to make sure I'm respectful of everyone's time. I want to thank everyone who participated and stuck through to the end. This has been so helpful. The input doesn't need to stop. There is a link to submit, which Jesse shared with everyone to submit written comments. I review everything. Happy to have one-on-one meetings with folks through this. And as long as I'm directing this office, I will continue to talk to everybody on their clean energy efforts and what we can do as a state to help advance and expedite deployment of clean energy and all of the above. So Jesse, did you have?
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Maria, for your time and sharing in the state in general for its emphasis on inclusivity in this process. That's really great to see. It's reassuring and hopeful that our solutions will be more long-term, long-focused solutions focused for all across the state. So I really want to applaud you in the office and everyone working on it for that. And also just thank everyone for their participation. I mean, your participation in this is so important. And so thank you for showing up and sharing your thoughts, ideas, challenges, all of that. So this is how we go faster, further together. So just a big thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.